1918 in Kuala Lumpur, 12:18 here in London. You're listening to The Briefing with me, Steve Bloomfield. Now, will Tunisia ever get a new constitution? Since Zine El Abidine Ben Ali was ousted in early 2011, the country has been transitioning, love that word, to democracy. But much like Egypt, the new government hasn't quite delivered what it promised. Today is supposed to be the deadline for the draft of the country's new charter, yet there's no clear sign that the parliamentary debates will be finalised on time. For the French language daily La Presse, Tunisia's lawmakers have already missed a rendezvous with history. And just days after Francois Hollande, the French president, visited the country, the outlook for Tunisia seems a little bit more gloomy than many had hoped. To discuss this further, I'm joined by the French-Tunisian journalist Nabila Ramdani. Nabila, welcome to the briefing. Why is it that it's taken so long for Tunisia to sort this out?
Well, I think the process is taking much longer in Tunisia precisely because the Constitutional Assembly has made the decision to elect representatives to draft the constitution rather than appoint them, as was the case in neighboring countries, including Egypt and Morocco. So by definition, this will take a longer time. But the idea behind this move was to guarantee greater legitimacy and give people a say and have more of a popular involvement effectively in the constitutional question.
I mean, when we look at how it works, I mean, what are the big issues? What are the big arguments that have been going on amongst different supporters?
I think Tunisia is trying to bring about a consensus over the country's national charter and try to establish it as a model for a turbulent region which has seen conflicts between liberal and Islamists, especially in the wake of the Arab Spring. And one of the core issues in the constitution has been the place of Islam and whether or not it should have a mention in the constitution. And the debate was so heated that, in fact, since the first draft was done last year, the constitution has been revised 3 times to try and bring about some checks and balances. For example, there was a very controversial mention in the first draft that women were referred to as complementary to men. Now, this was, of course, triggered outrage from secularists and opponents in general, protecting Tunisian values, as they put it. Now, this addition was dropped, and the prominent moderate Islamist party within a coalition in Tunisia also compromised on one of the key tenets of Islamist parties across the region, and they agreed to drop any mention of Sharia or indeed Islamic law in the first article of the Constitution. So there seems that it is taking a while, but a system of checks and balances established precisely by elected representatives behind the drafting of the Constitution seems to be getting somewhere.
Nabila, is it? I mean, I was vaguely critical in the introduction there, saying, "Oh God, they're going to miss their deadline." But I mean, it is only 2.5 years since Ben Ali was ousted. When you look historically, it took the Americans 13 years to get a form of democratic government after their revolution. The French, it took them 12 years after the storming of the Bastille before they got Napoleon, and Napoleon was no Democrat. Are we perhaps expecting a bit much?
I think not only indeed Western countries are looking at the Arab world now and they would like to see quick transition towards democracy, but I think the people in Tunisia and indeed in Arab countries are also very impatient at getting the core problems of the day-to-day life sorted, but that has to go through a due process and indeed due political process. But I think the crux of the reasons effectively behind the impatience of the people is to move on with things and fix first and foremost political and indeed economic problems at the heart of what triggered the uprisings in the first instance, and that's precisely what Tunisia is struggling with. Effectively, before it can attract foreign investors and get the economy back on its feet, it has to give the impression to foreign investors that it is stable enough to welcome foreign investors in the country again. And it has just secured a much needed 1.7 $72 billion loan from the International Monetary Fund. There are other funds on the way by the Islamic Development Bank. But during François Hollande's visit to the country, he also pledged financial help of 500 million euros to the country, and indeed perhaps get rid of the outstanding debt that the Tunisians owe to France. So at the heart of all this, economy is also essential.
Nabila, I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there. Nabila Ramdani, thank you very much for joining us. We've got